The first step in establishing an Imprimatura underpainting is going to be to tone your canvas. You can use raw sienna, the first step in creating your Imprimatura underpainting for this project is going to be to tone your canvas using either raw umber or burnt sienna. Either one, it doesn't make a difference. I'm going to use raw umber on my first pass at this painting. And I have my Gamsol and I have my raw sienna on my palette. I'm going to take a nice big brush and I'm going to loosen up my paint with that Gamsol just enough that I can get really good coverage with a nice thin coat of paint, and I'm going to cover the entire canvas with that. Now I want to make sure that I'm not applying the paint so thinly that I get a really light value. I want to get that good solid middle value on my page. I'm going to cover the whole thing with my brush, and then I'm going to let it sit for about 30 minutes or so to start to really establish a good tone on my canvas paper or canvas board, whichever you're using for this exercise. So there I have my canvas is covered. I'm going to smooth that paint out a little bit. I don't want any really heavy gobs of paint. And I'm going to let that sit for just a few minutes. I do not want to let this get totally dry at this point. So we're going to use the Imprimatura method to establish our initial values for this painting. So you want good solid coverage on your canvas. Got a little bit of glare on my canvas there I want to get rid of. Okay, so we're going to let that sit for a few minutes before we go to step 2. So the next step in the Imprimatura underpainting is going to be establishing your drawing. And again, I'm going to use raw umber for this stage of the painting, and with a small brush, I have a small filbert here, I am going to start to establish the layout of my painting based on what I have done in my sketch. So with a little bit of Gamsol and the raw umber, I'm going to start to just draw in the objects in my composition. So I've got the ellipse or oval at the top of the vase, and I want to establish the bottom edge of that vase. And I've already worked out my composition in graphite in my sketchbook so that this part of the process is not too labor intensive. And I've got that little triangle of the material, and I'm going to lay in the sphere of the ball here, And then I've got the fold of the fabric and the stripes on the fabric. So I'm laying this in with the same color but darker value that I used for toning my canvas. Get the shape of my blue shop towel. Very useful, the blue shop towels. They're not only good for cleaning, but they're excellent to provide you with a cool blue for our still life. And then I've got the napkin hanging here up above. Okay, so I've got my basic composition, bottom of that napkin comes here, and then I see a little bit of it behind the edge of my tall vase. All right, so the next step here is I'm going to be really blocking this in with 3 values, a dark value, a middle value, and a light value. So I've already got my middle value here, which is the tone of my canvas. So I'm going to come in with a little bit heavier paint, not so much Gamsol, and I'm going to lay in my darker values, and I think I need to move to a little bit wider brush. So I'm going to go with my very wide brush that I started with so that I can cover more ground. And so I'm really looking at where those areas of darkest dark are, which will be my background. And I've got a dark shadow on the side of the vase. So again, I'm being really general here. I'm squinting my eyes a lot so I can see those values more clearly. This is not meant to be a detailed painting yet. I'm really just setting in the most basic and general values. So I've got another dark value on the inside of the vase there. There's another shadow here on the side of the vase going behind my material there. And I've got a cast shadow underneath the ball. And then a dark shadow underneath the fold of that tan material, setting that off. And I'm going to say that my ground plane is also darker than my middle gray. Got a really thin little wedge of dark here and dark down the right hand side of the composition. And then I've got my dark corner at the top. Okay, and I've got a couple of dark areas within the blue of the shop towel there. Just that main shadow here, and then as it comes into the inside. Okay, so that's establishing my dark values. I've got my middle values now for the lighter values. So again, I'm only working in 3 values here. So for my light values, I'm going to get a piece of shop towel. And because this is still fairly wet, I haven't let it dry completely. If you let it dry completely, this won't really work. I'm going to come back with my shop towel and Again, you can't get much detail here because you're working with a piece of basically paper towel or rag. And I'm going to pull out my lights. Now there are some shadows within the white area, so I'm going to leave those. For example, the shadow here, I'm going to leave that in there in that middle gray, so that's a half-tone shadow. A little bit of light right at the top. And that white of that napkin here, it's got a little cast shadow underneath the blue shop towel. I'm gonna keep turning my shop towel so that I can get a clean area to wipe off so that I am really getting those good shapes for my light values. So you can see it's starting to set up pretty well. And this is where we've talked about our value patterns. So because you're working with very simple materials here, you've got a shop towel and a brush, there's not a whole lot you can do to establish any detail. So you have to state your value patterns very clearly for the composition to hold together. So it's kind of a good way to start a painting sometimes where you're really having to organize it in a very basic way that helps you to understand your composition. I've got a little bit of light here on the edge of that tan material. But, okay, so I've basically established my composition using 3 values, dark, medium, and light, and using my largest brush and my shop towel. Now at this point I'm going to let this dry, and then I will come back and work over the top of this underpainting with my limited palette that I mixed earlier.